I've got a new watch that helps me with my swimming, but I haven't yet learned how to tell it to tell me the time. So, yeah, okay. So given, you know, there's a theme of industrial policy in this conference. I'm going to have a bit of a few slides on the significance of the approach for industrial policy. And I mean, the essence of industrial policy is to move economies up this value chain in terms of manufacturing capabilities and design capabilities to the point where the economy is able to efficiently develop and deploy technologies so as to do more with less. Now this is I think a key message. There was a big distinction historically between kind of primary sectors, which were agricultural and mining, and secondary sectors being manufacture. And in terms of industrial policy, manufacturing was the key, because it was through manufacturing that you'd get spillovers of all kinds of disciplines to the broader economy and such like, and manufacture would lead in terms of technology innovation. I think the key thing is that distinction is no longer valid. The favorite example I use is, it's not original, it's from John Sender's, which requires greater technology complexity, exporting blueberries or exporting pharmaceuticals. And of course, pharmaceuticals are a cinch in comparison to blueberries. It's a controlled environment. The stuff gets packaged in a bottle. It'll stay fresh for years, etc., etc. Blueberries, on the other hand, a pallet comes into the packing place. It's tested. A message is sent to the farmer on bush on X and Y coordinates in your farm is getting X too much fertilizer, Y too little water, etc., etc. The blueberry is then packaged in very high-tech packaging to keep it fresh, put on a premium supply chain to arrive on Sainsbury's shelves at precisely the optimal moment for the ripeness of that blueberry for the consumer. So mining, you know, in Australia, mining is done remotely. People sit in Perth and 1,000 miles away, they're operating machine. There's a convergence in terms of technology complexity and the kind of disciplines that used to be thought of as manufacturing and industrial are now very much part of the mining and agricultural landscape as well. And I think that's key to bear in mind from an industrial policy perspective. So quick note on the mining cluster. I think you know, I don't want to tell you to suck eggs. Everyone knows the concept of a cluster. It's this notion of the system of activities which determine the success and competitiveness of a particular enterprise that falls within that system. And what this is, I see Paul is grinning because I think this was his slide. But the key takeaway is that unless you get the system humming, any individual mining company is going to be compromised. So mining is facing a number of serious challenges at this particular moment in times. 70% of platinum mines are underwater as we talk. We look at some of our commodity exporters. They are no longer in a position to compete with the really massive exporters in Brazil and Australia. there's a serious need to have interventions to improve their competitiveness. The other areas that are easily accessible resources, particularly gold, platinum, are becoming depleted. There's a need to develop new technologies to access deeper levels, and Navin is going to talk about that in some serious depth. There's improve safety, there's industrial relations problems. Our R&D capacity has been seriously denuded. Should I embarrass you guys, as I usually do? Okay, I won't embarrass the CSIR or DST around the priority of looking at the stars over, taking dirt out the ground. I would never, ever dream of embarrassing you. And of course, there's huge conflicts with mine proximate communities. So this whole cluster, this whole system within which mining operates is in a crisis. So if we try and summarize the three challenges, particularly from a political economy perspective, facing the mining industry, we've got this issue of modernizing existing operations, so as to mining can gear itself up for the next generation of systems and technologies, in the context of an incredibly conservative culture, a culture that was forged in steel in a racially discriminatory environment, labor-intensive environment. In the context of the degraded cluster, there's a need to actively intervene to build national R&D, skills development, upstream equipment, all the different elements, all key elements of that cluster need to be developed. And finally, the third area is in the context of a fragmented state, and one should actually say a fragmented political economy. I would say the mining sector is probably the most politically isolated sector in South Africa. It is facing a serious legitimacy crisis about how the value from mining is shared, and it does not have an enabling culture, capability, credibility to build bridges with key stakeholders to suggest that it can become this national asset. So it's in that context that you've got the PGM problem statement. And in a nutshell, the PGM is about developing collaborative solutions in response to the mining cluster's challenge. And these interventions are aimed to impact short and medium-term challenges in the cluster as a whole. So, in terms of what does this mean for the kind of theme of the conference and industrial policy? The whole essence of the PGM is based on a collaborative logic. So what does this mean? It means that, particularly in the fragmented political economy that we've got in South Africa, you can do only as much as you can agree with a critical number of stakeholders what they will agree to do with you, where they will be willing to put resources. Any strategy document that doesn't have that stakeholder buy-in is a wonderful piece of paper. Because if you're looking for a Chinese-type central state or a Korean-type central state that has the capability and the power to push through top-down compliance-type policies, I think you're going to spend a lot of time looking. So from an industrial policy point of view, there's a whole different paradigm of thinking, which is about you finding common cause with stakeholders. Your discussions with stakeholders about solving the problem It's not about ticking a box or on a compliance framework. You're focusing on impacts, not on ticking the box again, etc., etc. So the whole thing, the whole approach on this is building developmental coalitions involving state, private sector, civil society that have a critical mass of resources and political support to actually make something happen. And it's a bottom-up process, and any strategy that's developed outside of that reality is going to face a serious risk of remaining a piece of paper. So we've got 5 key programs within the PGM to develop the mining cluster while securing and improving livelihoods of key stakeholders, all key stakeholders. We've got developing new technologies to enhance productivity, developing and expanding the national mining supply chain, increasing beneficiation, and building a large-scale agri-industrial cluster on the rural development front. Now, Navin, I hope I'm not, the hub has been established. The old Chamber of Mines research organization facility at the bottom of Melville, which was mothballed, has been reopened. And it is now the kind of headquarters for a kind of a name that hasn't yet been fully agreed on, so it may change. But I'm going to call it the Mining Technology, Manufacturing and Sustainable Development Hub. And you can see there are a number of these different programs: mining RDI, procurement leverage, PGM beneficiation, steel RDI, rural development, etc. And the hub is purely an enabler. It's not building the capability to do all the stuff itself. And here you can actually see the physical layout of it. I'm sure you'll all want to know that Navin sits at that corner and Paul sits at the other corner. And there are a whole range of other organizations that are based there as well, and that are relevant to get this kind of cross-disciplinary impacts. But Navin is going to talk about it in greater detail. So first part of it, just in terms of the presentation, there's an R&D roadmap, and that will be the subject of Navin's presentation, just to put Navin's presentation in the context of this. I do want to emphasize that it's critical to see the R&D program and the industrialization process or the manufacturing development process as a continuum. That Navin, a lot of the R&D area will be at TR4 to 3 to 6, but then there's some ambiguity between TRL7 and TRL8, and there's a big exchange between South African OEMs around how we can take some of their developments and push them over the commercial edge, as well as there's some very, very interesting technologies that the mines have developed that we now need to, they've taken them to about TRL7, they've run out of steam, we now need to take them over the line. So it's important to see all these things as a continuum, not as, you know, an independent thing. I think it's critical for people to understand that from a mining company point of view, the procurement leverage process has got 4 objectives. It's providing building small and medium enterprises. Probably the biggest concern on their radar screen is creating economic opportunities in local communities, because those are the areas that will close things down. Driving transformation, and then they've got the kind of national objective of industrialization and such like. But it's very, very important to understand that they're trying to use procurement in a whole range of areas. I'm only going to, though, talk to the industrialization stuff, but there are a number of activities in the other areas as well, particularly around community business development. So the heads of supply chain at a number of the mines are seeing the development of the South African supply chain as a strategic necessity, given the decline of the rand, the currency risk, and that South African supplies are now cheaper. We're presently analyzing the spend of 4 mining companies to develop specific business cases from an industry point of view for supply development and localization, and this will be followed by more comprehensive analysis for the interventions. That, touch wood, should be finished this month. However, the one thing I want to emphasize, this exercise has taken almost a year longer than we thought it would. And the reason why it's taken a year longer than we thought it would, and why we've got such a struggle to leverage mining procurement to drive industrialization, is that mining supply chain capability is incredibly immature. It's amazing, you know, I was reflecting on this, you know, fast-moving consumer goods had this globalization driver to get their supply chains really slick and modernized. Automotive manufacturing had its, all kinds of industries have improved their supply chain. Mining supply chains are just unbelievably primitive. There just has, I don't know why there hasn't been a driver to improve the mining industry supply chain capability. So, for example, they do not in their SAP systems have a unique number based on a global code describing what they're buying. So you've got the situation where the same mine can be buying the same product from the same supplier at 2 completely different prices without even knowing that it's doing it. Now, can you imagine we're trying to aggregate what the mines are buying within a mine and across mines, when it's impossible to tell what the mines are, what a particular order is spending the money on. There's a text description, like, you know, grader parts. It is really, really primitive. I think cost pressures now and the move to greater mechanized mining will start acting as a driver for supply chain improvements. But it makes leveraging mining procurements difficult, and we're going to put a lot of pressure and whatever levers we've got at our disposal to get the mines to improve their supply chain. It's just profoundly inefficient business process. So, just to give you an example of a kind of value chain initiative that we've got going, which is along steel fabrication. There's a couple of mining companies now involved in it, and we've got Mittal and we've got a couple of fabricators on board. And we wanted to see, if we looked at this value chain as a whole, where is the weak point to lower the cost of fabricated steel products to the mining companies. And the overwhelming area, Mittal has a bit of a premium, the traders have a bit of a premium. The overwhelming problem is the fabricators have 1/3 of the productivity of their European counterparts. So what we're doing is we're working with GE to put in place the kind of technology transfers that are required to improve productivity, which everyone will benefit from. We've also working on a more of a long-term issue in partnership with Mintech. Our high-grade iron ore deposits in hot as hell are running out. In the Northern Cape are running out, and in the next 10 years, and we've really got to say if we're going to sustain a steel industry, if we're going to sustain exports of iron ores of different kinds, what kind of technologies are going to be required to achieve this. Now, I want to make a bit of a song and dance about PGM. How much time was? Still fine. About PGMs. In my opinion, the platinum group metals is the single biggest short to medium term strategic challenge facing the South African economy. At this particular point in time, I think the biggest or second biggest exporter by value of mineral resources, and the largest, second largest, the largest employer, I think, in the mining industry. And 70% of this industry is underwater. And, you know, everyone will know that at least one of them is on its last legs. That'll create immediate unemployment in Northwest of about 40,000. But when you take the multipliers into account, it's unthinkable. But the key thing about PGMs is PGMs need to be to South Africa in the 21st century what gold was in the 20th century. And it needs to take a national effort in the sense that PGM demand is derived. It's created through the development of new applications, industrial applications. We can't just depend on the mines to drive that process. It needs to be a national effort. So we need to create a context where PGMs become, the whole PGM cluster becomes some symbol of shared value in the country. And then we can really aggressively see how we can support the price of these commodities and the developments of new markets. But I think this is the most serious, relatively unknown strategic challenge facing the country, because if it goes northwest, then Limpopo will be pretty ungovernable. These are the kind of initiatives we're taking with around PGMs. There's a PGM roadmap. You know, Navin will talk about how the CSIR and the Chamber of Mine created a single roadmap for mining systems development. So the private sector and the state were investing in this, in the same project. We need to do that for PGMs. We're engaged with discussions with a major jewelry OEM about an export facility near Joburg International, some PGM Technology Center of Excellence. The interesting thing in the Technology Center of Excellence, I'm going on about a bit about PGMs because I think they're very important, is there are about 6 PGMs. Rhodium, iridium, bunch of others, the little ones. So there's the well-known platinum and palladium, and then there's these little ones. The amount of R&D that has gone into the small PGMs globally is very small because people have a serious security of supply concern. South Africa doesn't have that security of supply concern. So some of the mega OEMs, platinum OEMs, fabricators, are quite comfortable to support us to look at how we can become the global center of excellence in those little PGMs, because they would be too worried about security of supply. And okay, there's fuel cells, which there are a range of projects that are in the process of taking off, where the DTI is doing a serious job. So the agriculture, if you benchmark employment in agriculture in South Africa against other middle income countries, you find that the kind of average is 19% employment in agriculture. Sorry, not 19, 39% in agriculture. In South Africa, it's 4 to 5%. If you want to know the structural cause of our unemployment, it's agriculture. So the key thing being that we can't look at the development of agriculture around mines as a kind of social and labor plan project, as an isolated thing. We've got to look at it as an industrial development program that we can put into practice in partnership with some of the world-leading agribusinesses who've got the technologies, export networks, understanding of local conditions, et cetera, et cetera. So the issue is mining companies own a huge amount of land. So to get the show on the road, Sibanye has released 15,000 hectares of seriously good land, as well as in that 15,000 hectares, they've got a 10,000 square meter warehouse, empty warehouse, which apparently is just the most brilliant warehouse for hydroponics. And what we've done is put out an RFI looking for proposals around how different agribusinesses, different agricultural players can meet our objectives of creating jobs, building an agri-industrial cluster, developing local communities. Sibanye is making this land available for free, and they're also making 2 million liters of water, which they presently pump into the rivers, available for free. This just gives you a sense of the kind of funding structure. Sorry, I thought this pointer, does this have a pointer? So the essence of this funding structure is basically to enable PIC to put a lot of money into this process. And you can basically see there'll be a holding company which will hold a development company associated for getting the land to a state where farmers can move in, and then an investment company that can actually invest in the farms. And we're talking of 2 to 5 billion rand investment that has got, in principle, approval. So this is a summary of the kind of roadmap as a whole. You've got this R&D journey, which you can see is moving from modernized mining to intelligent mining. You've got the industrial development that Paul's going to talk more about, that is moving from where we are today to an export drive. We've got the beneficiation roadmaps in PGMs and steel, which we believe are the two most strategic minerals, and we've got our agricultural development process as well, starting today, moving into 2030. So we think we've got a platform to enable structured dialogue between stakeholders to discuss possibilities as to how problems can be solved, and then to put into place concrete actions to solve the problems. we've seen commitment from stakeholders, and this notion of kind of bottom-up industrial policy, developing your industrial policy in response to where stakeholders feel they will invest, et cetera, has, I think, some serious policy implications. And we've got these 4 programs: R&D, in, manufacturing, development, beneficiation, and rural development. Thanks a lot.